Our first guest tonight is the best-selling author and the Emmy-winning host of All In with Chris Hayes, which airs weeknights at 8 on MSNBC. He will also appear at the MSNBC Live Democracy 2024 event at Brooklyn Academy of Music here in New York on September 7th. Please welcome back to the show our very good friend Chris Hayes, everybody.
It's great to be back.
Summertime, usually slow. Even in a presidential year, it's usually slow for news. And yet this summer was a big news summer. And
sort of the opposite of slow.
Yeah. And we both had our last shows a day before Biden dropped out. We were on hiatus, and you had 2 weeks before you got to come back.
Yes, I was on vacation. My family and I took a great trip to Iceland.
Well done.
It was a great place. And we were at a little festival in a park in Reykjavik with my 6-year-old was in a bouncy council.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I get a notification. I was like, you gotta be kidding me.
Yeah.
And my other two kids.
Were you like, they have bouncy castles back in America.
Yeah.
Came all the way here.
We're going back to the airport. No. And then the other two kids were over there, and I waved it at Kate, my wife, and she. So,
yeah.
The one thing I did feel sort of salty about, and I think you would agree with this, is I thought those 3 weeks between that debate and him dropping out were 3 of the most brutal weeks of coverage.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just agonizing and anguished, and people were fighting with each other, and what's the path forward? And every day felt like 100 years.
Yeah.
And I was like, well,
I think that debate was 49 hours?
I think it was a 49 hours.
That's what it felt like watching it, right?
The first ever 49-hour debate. And I was a little I had 3 weeks of that coverage, and I didn't get the ecstasis of the sort of the third act of the drama. Mm-hmm. When this sort of climactic crescendo happens. I miss that.
One thing, I don't know if this happened for you, obviously, maybe not because you were on vacation, but there was that brief period, and I think in the week leading up, when obviously there was a lot of noise about people wish casting what they would like to happen if Biden dropped out. And there were a lot of people saying, I hope there's an open convention, or I hope there's some sort of mini primary. And very quickly, it was his announcement, and then I guess an hour later, his endorsement of her. And then very quickly, the whole party sort of coalesced behind her. Are you surprised at both how the unity in the party and also how well she seemed to have shepherded the flock?
Well, on the first point, I was not that surprised. And the reason is precisely because of how brutal those 3 weeks were.
Yeah.
Everyone was run down by it. And no one had an appetite you thought these 3 weeks were tough? Let's go have a super bloody intramural brawl in Chicago.
Yeah.
That'll be fun.
Yeah.
There was just zero appetite for it. So I think, A, there was zero appetite for it. B, in a sort of small d democratic sense, I think that there was sort of a kind of unavoidable and inexorable logic, which is when Biden didn't want to run out, he and his people would say, we did have a primary, and we did get the most votes. So, I am the nominee.
Yeah.
And that was true.
Yeah.
So the other person who was on the ticket who got those votes was Kamala Harris. And so from a sort of small d democratic legitimacy perspective, I think that it was just unavoidable. That said, I think she has navigated it with tremendous sure-footedness and grace, and it's been a wildly impressive political performance.
You were at both conventions.
Right? I was in neither.
Oh, you were neither?
No, we were.
Were you?
When you started to say that, I'm like, am I going to just go with this? But then I was like, I'm a newsman. I got to.
Were you at a bouncy castle in Reykjavik?
I was at a bouncy castle. Actually, we did both weeks at a bouncy castle in Reykjavik.
You covered them live from the bouncy castle.
That's right.
And you were sort of softly jumping the whole time, which I didn't love. I'll be honest, I didn't love. I was found very. Tell me about, though, the vibe, because it was interesting, because they both had really positive vibes because the massive piece of news of Biden dropping out happened between them.
Yes, and I think, look, I mean, it's very funny because that Republican convention, it was just so apparent that they were like, we have this in the bag.
Yeah.
I mean, both the selection of J.D. Vance, I think, suggested that they thought that was the case. The way that they programmed that convention, it wasn't like, who's the voter we need to win? Okay, the voter we need to win is a moderate to sort of conservative woman in the Philly suburbs. Like, great, Hulk Hogan. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Like, we got you. Yeah. No, like they were so leaning into the kind of who's going to stop us, and then boom, it happens. And then I think again because of how difficult the 3 weeks are after the debate, and I think the last few years, I think because of people's very complicated feelings of both adoration for Joe Biden in the Democratic Party, and also deep concern about his ability to win the election, that there was this kind of cathartic release that happened when the switch happened, when the convention happened, that has been just, it's really unlike anything I've ever covered in my career.
It does seem as though the Harris campaign is energizing progressives, young progressives,
yep.
Also appealing to moderates. And again, there's a lot of time left, obviously. But do you feel like she's doing a nice job of wooing both?
Yeah, I think they understand the assignment. I mean, it was interesting to see those first 2 ads. The first 2 ads they released, one was on the border, particularly on the border bill that was negotiated by Republicans and Democrats and then killed by Donald Trump in this sort of sheer cynical attempt to kind of preserve it as an issue. The second issue ad was about housing costs and about healthcare costs. And I thought, okay, they understand who they're targeting and where they're going here. And I think part of what, to be honest, what's sort of remarkable about this, in other countries, I'll let you in on a secret, they don't have 19-month campaigns.
Yeah. They have lives.
Like, they don't run for, you don't run for prime minister for 19 years.
Yeah.
It's like you got the and we are having a weird experience of this. It's almost like a snap election.
Yeah.
She becomes a nominee right around the convention, which again, that sort of used to be the deal.
Yeah.
The convention was the thing that made you the nominee. I mean, actually in a tangible sense, right? The convention is what makes you the nominee. And then you got 3 months. And I do think that her not having had run for 19 months and doing a bazillion different interviews in which she's on the record with a million different positions that are now going to be used to attack her in the general, it is obviously very helpful.
Yeah. It is funny because she does seem to have a lot more energy than Donald Trump. He must be like, I've been doing this for so long, I'm so tired.
It is funny to show up and shake it out and then run the last 50 yards and be like, peace.
I got a lot more to ask you. We'll be back with Chris after this break.